All right, another 2 weeks, another Design Duck video, and then we'll be taking a look at evolving a genre from Team Fortress 2 to Overwatch. So I'm not exactly sure what he's going to talk about. Well, in that exact topic, but we'll see. Seems like an interesting topic. We'll see.
If you wanted to take your favorite game and make it better, where would you begin? Where would you look for inspiration? What steps could you take to improve something that's already fantastic? There's a perfect game to study if you wanted to answer these questions. Blizzard's Overwatch. Overwatch took an amazing class-based team shooter, Team Fortress 2, and through years of work and dozens of design decisions, it created a new state-of-the-art for the genre. Let's take a deep dive on Overwatch and see how it builds on the success of Team Fortress 2.
Like he obviously talks about like a recent example, because obviously if you could look past and look at older games and how they evolved, you can definitely see these happening a lot more often, right? When first, when you have a first FPS being, for example, Doom or Wolfenstein, and going from how the FPS genre evolved from there, you can also see plenty of examples, right? Which, by the way, I watched a video the other day that kind of talked about this topic, so I might talk about it as well. But anyways, let's see. Obviously, it's easier to understand a bigger audience if you look at modern examples of this happening.
In 2007, Valve released Team Fortress 2 as part of the Orange Box. The game was a fresher, more up-to-date take on class-based team shooters with a bold new art style. TF2's original art direction was that of a realistic military shooter, but Valve would eventually retool its look and replace it with the style as seen in the final game.
And I talked about this like a lot as well in the video where I talk about the perfect art style, right? Which is a lot of the times, if you look at Team Fortress 1, it has aged massively, right? It looks very, very bad because they went for that realistic art style. But Team Fortress 2, on the other hand, although you could argue that it could be done better now, because, you could see if you look at the characters and so on in some of the images here as well, you can see that some extra polygons would go a long way. But the game has not aged that badly. It still looks pretty good. It still holds up today because of that change into that stylized art style, which I always say, like, unless you have massive resources and you can afford to do like the best of the best currently, realistically, go for a stylized art style, because it's gonna last longer. You're gonna make it pop a lot more. It's gonna be a lot more original. And it's gonna work better. So this is another example of this actually happening in the same franchise as well, from Team Fortress 1 to Team Fortress 2.
But Valve would eventually retool its look and replace it with the style as seen in the final game. As graphics improve over time, TF2's stylized look has kept itself from looking dated in the decades since,
Exactly.
even without a major graphics update. Other games released around the same time as TF2 without that strong art direction haven't aged nearly as well. You don't exactly hear about how amazing Haze or Army of Two look now, do ya? First, let's get the easier steps out of the way. Any game benefits from improving graphics, sound, and gameplay. So how did Overwatch improve on TF2 in these categories?
I mean, Overwatch, like, it's the last game from Blizzard that was made with how Blizzard knew how to make games, I guess, which were all extremely polished, amazing art style, like great attention to detail, soundtrack, sound design, everything on point. And Overwatch is the last example of a game like this by Blizzard. After that, well.
Blizzard, like Valve, chose to give Overwatch a very strong art direction. Stylized, bright, and cartoonish. The art of Overwatch should stand out for years to come. Overwatch has a greater level of environmental detail in each map, which gives each location a more unique feel.
Which is also, like, a lot of people criticize, and I do as well, the fact that Overwatch 2 hasn't changed that much. And first of all, although I expected potentially more changes, more than anything, I expected the single-player campaign to be on directly, but that's kind of another topic. You can't really expect them to improve too much on the art style without changing it. So the fact that the art style has not changed, the graphics have not really changed that much, is because of what we're talking about, like, Overwatch is already a perfect art style that if you want to improve it, you can't really improve on it too much. Like, sure, you could add reflections, you could add more stuff, but it looks even better if you actually have like more uh shader type reflection and like more purposely made reflection than having realistic reflection. So it's just gonna there's really not much. In essence, that's what I'm going to say. There's not much that you can improve from it.
For example, look at all of the objects to destroy and mess around with in the spawns of Hanamura or in Dorado, and then look at the simpler, more bare-bones spawn rooms of TF2. Overwatch also had more variety in its maps.
And the other thing is, yeah, that those things don't really add too much to the game. Right? The fact that you can destroy stuff in your spawn, which you barely ever spend time in, apart from like the very first seconds at the beginning. Like, who cares, right? But that fact that he added all these little details adds so much level of polish that it feels very good, and the game improves massively.
Whereas TF2 had maps mostly set in industrial desert environments, which, while cohesive, it was a bit monotonous. Now, what about characters? Both Overwatch's heroes and TF2's classes are packed with personality from their designs, taunt animations, voice lines, and even weapons. But Overwatch takes things a step further with highlight intros, and perhaps most impressively, the way every hero moves. This is most evident in everyone's walk cycle, as they are unique for each character. The way a character moves in the third person matches with their view in the first person. Even in the first person view, they communicate the identity of the player. Lucio feels like he's skating around, Bastion and D.Va feel heavy and robotic, Genji sounds light.
And that, for example, is also has also a lot to do with the sound design itself. Having a big bonk when it's moving, and not having a when it's just sliding through like Lucio. It also improves a lot. It's not just about the head bop and the animations themselves. Sound design has a lot more impact than a lot of people give credit to, I think.
On his feet like a ninja, and Junkrat looks and sounds like he's limping. Most of the walk cycle differences in TF2 are just faster or slower. They're not very unique from each other, and they don't really convey their personalities. Really, their weapons just sort of bob up and down, and they don't really match with how they move in the third person. Moving on, Blizzard has also added a ton of graphical polish in other areas. Look at the HUD. A silky smooth ultimate ready animation, timers that blink when skills become available, flashy graphics for when the round ends. Overwatch also pays a lot of attention to detail in the typography and layout of its menus. So instead of something big and dramatic, it's Overwatch's little improvements here and there that make it a higher quality graphical experience.
It's not little improvements, it's just a good level, an amazing level of polish everywhere. Like, independently of where you look at it, the level of polish is incredible. Like TF2, for example, the menus, like here he's been talking about the menus in TF2 are very simple, are like almost the basic source menus. Sometimes you even have like you do have like the basic loading of the source, and you have like the how do you call it, the console that appears sometimes, and it's like that doesn't feel like a polished game. Overwatch is what I mentioned before. It's really the last game that Blizzard did with an amazing level of polish in all aspects of the game.
What about improving on TF2's sound design? Instead of just adding more lines of dialogue or improving audio quality, Overwatch uses sound differently to improve upon the core gameplay. The gameplay in a class-based team shooter rewards teamwork. It's right there in the name. Overwatch is no different. The quickest way to lose a match is to charge in alone into the front lines. So, how do you encourage teamwork? In a game where the team with the best communication often wins, your team can do a lot better by just bumping up the amount of communication. What if the game automatically called out events? TF2 sometimes does that, as there are callouts for pushing the cart, when someone is on fire, if someone is capping a point, and other situations. Overwatch adds to this idea. Players will hear when teleporters exist, and they will also hear unique voice lines for when ultimate abilities are in use. Having automatic callouts lets you get more information out of teammates that can't or won't use a microphone. Character voices, footsteps, and other action sounds are also more dynamic in Overwatch. They change, not just by how far away you are from the source of the sound, but also how important the sounds are.
Well, that is just a good mixing. That also has a lot to do with like nowadays technology compared to when TF2 was made. Like the fact that you can make dynamic sound, the fact that you can easily make it so that a sound is going to sound differently if it's behind a door than if it is in front, directly towards you. Those kind of things can be done dynamically now in engines. When maybe like Source Engine did not have those capabilities to begin with. Uh, and the different sound levels, which are just like a good mixing, just giving correct priorities to the different sounds. If you give high priority to footsteps and you give lower priority to other stuff, then if there's a lot of stuff happening, then you'll probably hear the footstep more than you hear the other things. That's just clever. I guess it's polish in the mixing as well.
For example, the ultimates of your enemies are significantly louder than those of your allies. All of this dynamic audio lets you concentrate on what the other team is doing without as many distractions. What about gameplay? Class-based team shooters revolve around the game's characters, their movesets, and how they're balanced with each other. To improve a game like this, you might think you could just add more classes. And Overwatch does do this. There are over double the number of classes compared to TF2.
Definitely.
But Overwatch mixes and matches classes, and adds some new mechanics and new combinations of abilities to make the range of characters better.
I mean, the way that TF2 did this, the thing is TF2 kind of, their main concept was a little bit different. Like, Overwatch, what it does, each character is unique, has its own abilities, and that's basically it. And you can make as many as you want, and that's basically it, right? While Team Fortress 2, they have a set of characters that start with, and you're never going to add more characters to that roster. What you can do, on the other hand, is add weapons and other stuff which can have extra abilities. So then, the thing is, yes, two different, two scouts can still have the basic movements of a scout and other stuff, but depending on their weapons or depending on the stuff that they use, they're going to act slightly differently. The problem with this is that you cannot you can't really go too far from what the scout is in essence, and also the other issue is, as a player, if you see a scout coming, you will expect him to act a certain way, and seeing him act differently might confuse the player. And having very specific heroes, that always, if you see Lucio, you know exactly what he's gonna do, right? It really just depends on how the player uses it. It has like a little bit of a different vibe to it, I think, and I think it's easier to understand. It feels more clear, I think, for players as well.
Overwatch's roster starts with many close parallels to many of TF2's classes. Mercy as the medic, Junkrat as the demo man, Torbjorn as an engineer. But then you add some twists to other TF2 classes. Pharah is a soldier with easier mobility, Bastion is a fragile heavy with a bit less mobility, Hanzo is a sniper with wall hacks, and after that, they create entirely new characters by mashing together specialized TF2 loadouts. Lucio and Pharah take the Pyro's pushback mechanics, Genji can use reflect mechanics like a Pyro, and can double jump like a scout. Symmetra can shield players, which is similar to how the medic can overheal, and she also gets the engineer's teleporter. Reinhardt's charge is similar to that of a demo man's charge, and a character like Zenyatta can damage at range, debuff, and heal all at once. Lastly, Blizzard adds in totally new mechanics to make even more characters, with area healing for Lucio, Soldier 76, and Ana, completely unique barriers for Zarya, D.Va, Winston, and Reinhardt. Winston gets a no-aim weapon.
Yeah,
you can change.
So that is the difference, I think, which is that for each character you can make whatever you want, and you can make them as unique as you want. It doesn't matter. In TF2, on the other hand, because they're based on a specific character, you can't really. It's more. They go more for like a modular type system instead of a. Well, each character is completely different. You can do whatever you want with it. Have fun with it, kind of thing.
Change your opponent's mobility with Mei's freeze gun and Lucio's speed boost. Even without coming up with all that many new mechanics, you can still get a lot of fresh feeling character designs by mixing and matching like this. So far, we've talked about how Blizzard has improved on TF2's graphics, sound, and gameplay, but that's usually not enough to make a new game really stand out from its predecessors. There are plenty of new games out there that have taken beloved older games, improved on its graphics or improved on gameplay mechanics, and have still struggled to really catch on with players. To really stand apart from TF2, Overwatch came up with its own setting and its own themes. Instead of a 1950s Cold War setting, the backdrop is a near-future Earth set after a robotic uprising, where a supergroup of specialized fighters try to rebuild their reputations in order to save the Earth once again.
Like, that's more of a storytelling thing. Of course, I do think it matters, but it feels it's a bit different because they could have gone for a different, setting, and it could have worked as well. It's not the fact that they chose this setting that is gonna make it work, but it is obviously if you're gonna make a quote unquote a clone, you have to make a different setting. If you do the exact same setting, obviously it's just not gonna work because it's gonna be seen as a pure clone. Like Overwatch was already criticized for being a clone of TF2. So if they went even like with a Cold War setting, then you lost it. So obviously they have to make a new setting that is like thing. Then what setting they do, as long as it's well made and they create enough lore and stuff, and that's one of the things that Overwatch did very well, is because of with the addition of these cinematics, this like comic pages and stuff like that. They started releasing. They started creating. They started giving the players like a world to be interested in, and a whole set of lores. Why do the characters interact with each other? Who are they? How do they know each other, etc.
That's simple enough to do, but in changing the setting, all of a sudden some of the design decisions made in TF2 might not work in the context of Overwatch. Blizzard
Yeah, if you can also make it work with your gameplay and stuff, then that's even better.
needed to identify and fix these problems to make Overwatch feel cohesive. To see how a difference in a game's setting can cause design changes, let's take a look at an example: character skins. TF2 has a strong red versus blue theme that it sticks to in its uniform design. Characters wearing uniforms makes sense in TF2's lore, but Overwatch, on the other hand, treats its characters more like superheroes, and therefore doesn't have to use uniforms in its character design. Plus, if characters in Overwatch don't have to wear a uniform, then you can do more dramatic costume changes than you did in TF2. Dropping uniforms also.
And because like one of the things about TF2, like I mentioned before, is that a lot of variety in gameplay for each hero, for each class, was based on the weapons that we're using. So if you wanted to use a certain weapon, you were gonna look a certain way. While in Overwatch, the look is completely independent. The way the things that you choose cosmetically are completely independent from the character because the character never changes. You just have more of them, basically.
Also presents a design challenge. If the characters in Overwatch don't have to look like their team members, and players on opposite teams can look like each other, then how do you know who to shoot? To solve this, Blizzard outlines all opponents in red, and makes it so that you are always fighting against the red team. A simple but effective solution.
Yeah.
The designers of Overwatch broadened the range of character designs that would feel like they fit in the game, opened up an opportunity to customize and make money with cosmetic items, and change how some of the core gameplay has to work. 3 significant changes about character costumes, all caused by the change in setting. We've seen how Overwatch improves on what TF2 does already, and how Blizzard made their changes fit into the new context of Overwatch, but there has been 8 years of new games and new ideas since the release of TF2.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at some other popular games for more improvements. First of all, each character has their own abilities, cooldown timers, and ultimates, very similar to that of a MOBA. The character design in Overwatch is also very heavily inspired by many common tropes found in MOBAs. The best example of this would be Roadhog, who serves the role as the hook character, similar to that of Pudge in Dota 2, or Blitzcrank and Thresh in League of Legends. Instead of using TF2's static kill screen, Overwatch uses kill cams similar to that of Call of Duty. There are also tons of games that have separated their serious and less.
Which is why I also mentioned before that these kind of changes and how genres evolve over time can also be you can find a lot more examples in the past and more kind of very very innovative examples in the past because there were not that many games or that many things popping up all the time. Nowadays, because of how many games are released all the time, obviously when people are making a new game, they're going to be inspired by everything. So if they're making FPS, they might still be inspired by MOBAs and might still be inspired by other types of game, and they might try to incorporate all of that into their own game. So obviously, yeah, this is obviously going to happen, and it's a good thing.
Less serious player pools into different game modes, which helps everyone get what they're looking for in a play experience. A huge improvement on the matchmaker options in the early days of TF2. Even Blizzard's own games are great opportunities to fold in new ideas. Team Fortress started the hat economy, but Blizzard has been tinkering with it for years in World of Warcraft, Diablo 3, Heroes of the Storm, and Hearthstone. Even the ceremony that plays when you open a loot box is very close to Hearthstone's card pack opening animation. Blizzard also looked to the wider gaming community for inspiration. Overwatch added some ideas for character ultimate abilities that were literally hacks and exploits in other games. Soldier 76 and McCree's ultimates are aimbots, Widowmaker can see through walls, Hanzo's ability no-clips the map, and Zenyatta becomes invincible. While Blizzard was borrowing ideas from other games and genres, it was also important to think about what ideas would not work if you transplanted them into Overwatch.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it seems like he said it in like a bad way, as in because it was boring. Not really, like he was he's explaining it. It's fine. He's not complaining, but that's normal. And every time you're making a new game, that you're gonna look at examples, and you're gonna pick up things, and that's what he's gonna mention right now, which is that. Yeah, of course, but you have so many games to look for that you're not going to pick up everything. Like, your game has a setting, your game has an objective, has a type of gameplay that you're looking for. You can't just incorporate stuff from other games and hope that it works. If this game has this one, my game has 3 times the amount, so it's better, right? That's not how it works. A lot of the times, a lot of people say less is more, and in many situations, that is actually the case.
Even though Overwatch heavily mixes in MOBA concepts, it smartly keeps some of them out. They kept away from some of the more time-consuming menu-driven bits.
I mean, it's not a MOBA. So first of all, obviously there's not going to be lanes, there's not going to be stuff, there's not going to be like towers to destroy and stuff like that. It's not a MOBA. So obviously this is not going to be part of it. Like the shop, sure, whatever. Of course it's not going to be in it.
To better fit in with the quicker pace of a shooter. You don't see things like leveling up, shops, or ability trees, for example. Making a new game like Overwatch also lets a design team remove old genre conventions that don't really serve a purpose in a new design. Overwatch streamlined some of the more fiddly bits of TF2.
And even making a MOBA, Blizzard didn't do everything like everyone else. For example, one of the things they did, like they showed here, instead of having a shop, you have like a skill tree that you can improve whenever. You don't level up individually, but you level up as a team. And all of these things, but those 2 things are actually things that I actually liked. The shop I did like the shop in League and Dota, because you could do like weird builds, which is always nice. But in any game that you make, you don't have to do exactly like the previous games.
Like wondering when a health pack will respawn, or how it removes ammo pickups entirely. Really, inspiration can come from just about anywhere, and it's often more effective to start from something that other games have tested than to create everything from scratch. That being said, a game is way more likely to stand out if it shows off something new. To do this, the designers of Overwatch have done a lot of work to make the downtime in between matches feel much livelier. My favorite addition is the play of the game. Take the last kill cam concept from Call of Duty and add in slick visuals to create a Sports Center worthy highlight for every game you play. Even after hundreds of matches, I still love seeing these highlight reels at the end of each game. Even when the game picks a weird moment, the packaging still makes the game end on a high note. Who doesn't love watching a good Torbjorn corpse replay? Or Lucio pushing like 4 people off the map at once? I really hope that future games take this idea and expand it. Blizzard also had another new idea. A new way to show leaderboard stats. You don't get to see how any other team member is doing. Instead, you see your own stats, and a gold, silver, or bronze medal if you're in the top 3 of your own team. That change, getting away from focusing on everyone else to focusing on how you yourself are performing, lowers chat toxicity by making it harder to single out less skilled team members, while still telling you just how well you're filling your own team role. Overwatch's new ideas are not dramatic. They're smallish tweaks that still improve the game in a meaningful way. You don't need to add a huge number of new ideas. As long as they're fresh and worthwhile, a little will still go a long way.
And a lot of the times, if you're building a game, so let's say you're building a new MOBA, are you gonna start borrowing ideas from other MOBAs. You're gonna think, oh yeah, I'm gonna make my MOBA like this, but I'm not gonna have a shop. I'm gonna do it like Heroes of the Storm, but then I want to add an actual normal lane, like 3-lane thing. I don't want to do like those mini games that each map has in Heroes of the Storm. I want to go more towards like a Dota thing, right? With like a destructible environment, stuff like that, right? You start borrowing, and that's kind of how your game starts shaping. And as you're developing the game, your game should start having its own character, its own design, its own idea, right? Its own thing. And as you move towards that own like specialized game that you're making, new mechanics are going to pop naturally. So suddenly things that were not necessarily things that would not have come up at the beginning, you think, oh, now that my game is shaping up to be this other thing or this new concept, then this mechanic can fit into it very well. And those kind of new things come as you're developing the game. A lot of the times, like most of the times nowadays, that's I would say, unless you're really going for a completely new concept, most of the time that's what you do. Your first idea is you take multiple games, multiple genres potentially, and you decide my game is going to be a little bit like this, right? I'm going to take this from this game, take this from this game, and I'm going to shape it like this, but I'm going to add like a medieval fantasy style onto it, right? And suddenly, slowly, you're creating this new game that has its own style, its own design, its own world, and slowly these new mechanics start coming into place, and that's how you start realizing the things. And a lot of the times, that's why most games, you go through a lot of iterations, and what you have to do is try to realize what your game is good at, what is really standing up, and what's creating the character of your game, what's really giving it its strengths, and try to continue in that direction until you have like a game that you actually very much enjoy, and these new mechanics are going to pop up on your own.
Overwatch has brought the state-of-the-art forward, mixed in some of the greatest hits from other genres, and added a few killer features of its own. Now, Overwatch isn't flawless, no game is, but combined so many ideas and improvements into one fantastic game that it instantly became the go-to example for what a class-based shooter can be. The beautiful thing about this process is that it never ends. Someone in the future will think about Overwatch, its imperfections, and the new lessons designers will learn over the coming years,
Of course.
and make something that pushes that bar even higher.
And then that game will also look at new games that will pop from Overwatch to whenever that game is being made, and it's going to say, well, actually, we could probably borrow these other things. That's just how it's done. That's just the normal way.
That's the game I can't wait to play, but for now, I think I'm going to play some Overwatch. Gonna get some skins.
Yeah, interesting video. So what I wanted to say at the beginning, I talked about, you can also look at very old games for this, and for more significant, I think, evolutions in FPS. And I mentioned at the beginning that I've actually watched a video recently that covered this kind of. There was a video of a French YouTuber who basically talks about games that really had an impact on him, I guess. And he was talking about GoldenEye for GameCube. And one of the things he was mentioning is that it was the first FPS game that he played, and that he believes was actually the first FPS game to do this, that went from a all action, all powerful single player character, first person character against many enemies, to go from you are actually weak and you have to be cautious about. You do take it slow. So previous games FPS, like I said, were, for example, Wolfenstein or Doom and stuff, and those games are just, you have guns, you have better guns, and then you just go through enemies and just kill them, and that's basically it. And in GoldenEye, suddenly they added the this idea that you are a secret agent, but you are pretty much as strong as any other NPC, and the way that you gain the advantage is by being sneaky, basically. So you go from behind, you shoot them in their head with your silencer, and that kind of added a whole new perspective. It's still technically an FPS, but it followed a different storyline, and it added all these new things that made it completely different. So that's why I say you can find very good examples of this evolution in thing when looking at older games, because they also have a lot less of what we were talking here, where it's borrowing mechanics from other games. They were actually the pioneers of the creation of new mechanics and new ways of actually doing it. Obviously, then if you look at GoldenEye, you can probably have games that do it a lot better nowadays, of course. But back then, it was like a big leap from going from a Wolfenstein or a Doom to an actual game where it's still a shooter, it's still a first-person shooter, but now has this stealth mechanic. This like NPCs actually react whether or not they are seeing you or not seeing you. You know, being able to actually trick the NPCs and stuff like that, which is great. So yeah, great video, great video. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm doing it like if we were gonna talk a little bit more about this, like I'm obviously I'm doing a survivor now, basically a vampire survivor clone, and what I did before starting to make this game is I just played a bunch of survivor clones. I played a bunch, and I kind of made a list of the things that I wanted to borrow from a game and another. And then I said, well, I'm going to borrow this from this game, borrow this other thing from this other game. I actually don't want to do this. So some games had certain mechanics that were like, oh, I don't like this for my game, so I'm not going to take this. So it's not only choosing mechanics that I want to put in my game, but also mechanics that I don't want to put in. I want to go away from. For example, an example of this is, for example, Vampire Survivor has this health bar, and you lose health when the enemies hit you, but you don't know exactly how much health you lose every time. And you just see it go down differently depending on the enemy. It's going to hit you more or less. And other games, what they do is they do like Binding of Isaac or others, where you have a set amount of health. You have a very limited, but like very clear amount of health, and you know exactly if I'm going to hit, independently of who hits me, it's going to remove me 1 health, right? And then you know exactly, well, I can get hit 3 times, I can get hit 4 times. And that is something, for example, that I chose to go for my game. And how am I going to make this game is the same thing. Is I'm going to first start incorporating the mechanics that I like, right? Start making my game through there, and as it evolves, I'm going to start, I'm adding also like a steampunk theme into it. So as it evolves, I'm going to start creating this game is going to start having its own personality, its own character, and slowly I'm going to move towards, I'm going to start, having a more clear direction as to how I want to move to, like how I should improve the game, and new mechanics and new stuff should appear in my head as I'm making them, So anyways, I guess it's a good segue to say that you can find my game on itch already. It's obviously extremely early, and you can follow me on Twitch, and I stream the development of my game. Everything is done on Twitch. I never do anything on my own. Well, I do look for art and other potential things like that, but all the development itself is made on itch. So there you go. The game for now, it's called Steam Survivor, but it's work in progress title. I'll probably change it. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.